Hi everyone, welcome to Coaching Safety at the Management Level. It's presented today by Steve Hamilton, Senior Loss Control Specialist with Berkshire Hathaway Home State Companies. My name is Lisa Wood and I will be the moderator. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, we encourage you to use the chat panel located in the bottom right-hand corner of the control panel on your screen. If you cannot find the control panel, you should see an orange arrow in the top right of your screen that will pop the control panel out for you. To ask a question, click on the chat box and type in your request. Then click Send Privately box and direct your questions to me, Lisa Wood. We will answer your questions towards the end of the webinar. If we run out of time, we will follow up with you via email. All telephone lines are on mute for this call. The webinar is being recorded. If you are a member of the National Association of Landscape Professionals, you may access it on the Member Center section starting next week. All right, at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Steve.
All right, hello everybody. As Lisa said, my name is Steve Hamilton. I'm a Senior Loss Control Specialist with Berkshire Hathaway Home State Companies. BHHC is a workers' comp carrier. We're based primarily in California, although we do have a national presence. I think we're the second largest carrier in California. So nationally, I forget what the number is, but I know we're creeping up there. And really our goal is to make sure that we provide good, effective workers' comp coverage for everybody, and that includes safety efforts. So if you are a Berkshire Hathaway Home State Companies policyholder, and an NALP member, I encourage you to reach out to both of us to get as many of the resources that are available to you and work towards being a positive, proactive, safe person. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what we call coaching safety at the management level. And I'll start the presentation really with a little bit about my background. I want to make sure that everybody understands too that everything I do during this webinar really is designed to help coach you as managers, give you some examples, give you some behaviors, and demonstrate some activities that you can take with you back to your place of employment, back to your company. If for some reason we don't address your questions, I will give my contact information at the end. I encourage you to reach out. I am always available to answer any questions by email or by phone. The phone number at the end is my cell phone number, so please reach out directly to me. I am also not above coaching. Please understand that this presentation is a work in progress. This is something that we do on a pretty regular basis, but we evaluate it, develop it, change it, make it flexible for whatever the audience is. So the presentation really was designed for a one-on-one class with the owners of companies, the owners of landscape companies, whether it's landscape maintenance or construction or tree companies. It's a one-on-one class to try and help you coach your employees or maybe even coach yourself towards positive behavior. So again, I am not above coaching myself. Please, if you feel that I need some guidance, I encourage you to reach out. There is no ego behind this. My background, I went to college to become a high school English teacher. I'm a big fan of teaching. I like communication. I like effective communication. I like making sure that everybody has the tools to do their job safely. My family are all teachers. My parents were teachers for 45 years. My wife's a teacher. My sister and her husband are teachers. All of our friends are teachers. And I'm a safety consultant for a workers' comp carrier. So I think it's important for you to understand that I understand the dynamics of teaching. And I use that in my daily interactions with my clients every single day. I've been doing workers' comp safety for about, I think 18 years now, 17, 18 years. And I enjoy working with clients directly because really I'm the guy at your workers' comp carrier that's trying to help you get better, trying to prevent accidents, trying to get you to take your business to the next level by protecting your most important assets, your employees. So the origin and intent of this presentation, this came about because a lot of employers are doing a fantastic job of presenting safety material. I know Sam Steele just did a heat illness prevention webinar in cooperation with the OSHA Alliance a week or two ago. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to reach out to the association and download it. It's a fantastic presentation. The problem with a lot of employers is that they're doing this great presentation, but they're not following through with it. They're giving their foreman, let's say, for example, the material and saying, hey, Mr. Foreman, go out and teach this. But they're not teaching them how to teach. They're not showing them how to back this up with good, effective teaching methods or good, effective communication skills. So this came about really because we wanted to guide one of our clients in the proper method of coaching their employees, coaching their foreman, and actually coaching the owner. Because in this particular case, the owner had some issues that we needed to guide back towards the positive. So that's kind of the way it went. That's the way it was developed. And as we work through the presentation, you'll see at several moments there are spots where you may be able to take that information and use that in your own company. I encourage you to beg, borrow, and steal any of this information and use it. If you don't know how to use it, or you want a hard copy, or if I can help you with some things, again, please reach out to me at the end. What I hope you receive are a couple things. I want you to get a good idea of how to coach, when to coach, why to coach, the proper methods of coaching, safe behavior. But I also want to give you a good, solid example of a company that maybe had some issues that are typical of a landscape maintenance company. I thought that would be the best way to demonstrate some of these activities. And then we'll work through the process of where they were and where they ended up. So I thought that would be one way we could kind of help you through the process. And again, at the end, if you have any issues or if you have any encouragement for me or feedback, please reach out. If I can help you, that's why I'm here. So ultimately, coaching safety is about teaching folks how to be leaders. And I picked these 4 quotes because I think they apply to the landscape professional industry. Ken Blanchard is the author of The 1 Minute Manager, I believe. And his quote is, the key to successful leadership is influence, not authority. What you want to be as a leader, what you want to teach your leaders out in the field is to influence behaviors. Don't go out with a heavy hand, but go out and teach them how to influence towards the positive. Discourage the negative, but influence towards the positive. Sun Tzu was a Chinese general, a strategist, and he wrote the book, The Art of War. And his quote I like is, a leader leads by example, not by force. If you have folks in your organization that don't know how to model behavior, don't know how to model positive behavior, it might be time to coach them towards the positive and teach them how to demonstrate, rather than to, grab them by the hair and say, you're not doing this right, or grab them by the disciplinary action, so to speak, and write them up. We can lead by example, not by force. General Eisenhower's quote, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it. And I think that's important to note. As a landscape professional, if you're an owner or a manager, you are scattered all over the place. You have crews in a widely distributed area. You can't be everywhere at the same time. What you want to do is motivate your employees to do the right thing because they want to do it. That's really the key. That's where we start to build that positive safety culture. And you build that trust between employee and manager, employee and foreman. If we can trust them to do the right thing, then I think the coaching process is a positive thing. And ultimately, Bill Gates at the bottom there, we want to empower our leaders. We want to make sure that they have the power and the authority to make some changes. So when we talk about coaching, that's really where we're focusing. So I thought it's important to remember that. Now, for landscape professionals, I can tell you, I can sympathize. My book of business right now is about a quarter. It's 75% of one industry and 25% landscape professionals, whether it's landscape maintenance companies or landscape construction or tree companies. My book of business is significantly heavy in the landscape field, landscape industry. So I know some of the challenges you face, especially when we're dealing with safety. Production almost always takes a center stage. If we're not producing, if we're not out in the field, making some positive waves, making some positive business decisions, we're not going to create enough cash flow to move forward and pay my bill as a workers' comp carrier. You're focused on quality a lot of times, and safety steps to the side for quality. More often than not, you have to deal with difficult clients. Sometimes not even your clients, but folks who are next door to you who don't like the way your backpack blower is making too much noise when they're having Sunday coffee. There are regulations that keep popping up. Walking working spaces is one of them. Silica exposure is another. Everybody's out trying to get you to follow regulations, and they're not giving you time for safety. There's a tough labor market. It's tough to find good new employees because unemployment is so low. We can't lose sight of that. We need to keep focusing on teaching safety. There are environmental concerns. We deal with OSHA on a pretty regular basis. All of those are challenges that you face, things that are speed bumps to positive, safe behaviors. Things that take time away from the real important things, keeping good, solid control over your assets, your employees, okay? Some other challenges, your crews are spread all over the place. You may have a very limited opportunity to speak to your employees in the morning when they're getting ready for the day's work. 5 o'clock in the morning comes pretty early. Those guys want to load up and get out in the field, especially now when it's getting hot. So we have limited time for training. Often there's no incentive for those guys to pay attention. They're too focused on what happened this past weekend, and they're not paying attention during their morning stretch and flex. There's little to no buy-in for safety efforts. The employees are there just to get a paycheck. So we need to fight all of that. We need to fight apathy. We need to make them care. We need to try and take away their sense of entitlement, and make sure that they're working towards the greater good, working towards that positive, safe attitude. If these challenges continue, we end up with a negative safety culture. We end up with folks who make some very bad decisions. And my next slide has a picture that I want you to look at for a moment. And if anything pops up, you can, chat and send me a question. But this particular picture, hopefully everybody can see it. This is one of my policyholders. If you're out there, please don't identify yourself. This employee doesn't happen to be an employee of the company. In fact, he's not even an employee of the company now. But I drove up onto a job site one day and I saw this gentleman taking a nap in the feed chute to a wood chipper. And there are all kinds of things that are wrong with this picture. But my very first question was, what led to this scene? What led to this behavior? What led to this? Who needed to be coached and taught to minimize this type of behavior? I could have picked any number of examples. I just happened to pick this one with a wood chipper. Employees make bad decisions on a pretty daily basis. Whether they're moving materials from the drop-off zone to where they're spreading. They're moving mulch from the drop-off zone to the flower beds. I've come up on job sites where a skid steer grabs the mulch, takes it to the flower bed, and just for fun, the guys that are helping them jump into the skid steer's bucket, and they ride back to the loading zone. Those are all poor decisions. Those are all employees that need to be coached in the proper way. So what I would ask you to do, and I put it up on the screen here, I want you to think about this particular example, this gentleman sleeping in the in the wood chipper. By the way, he's safe. He we managed to get him out of the wood chipper before anything significant happened. But you know, ask yourself, whether it's this example or one that's in your daily life, what happened to make this employee suddenly decide that taking a nap in a wood chipper is okay? This guy was on a major street with significant traffic and poor traffic control, no warning systems, no signs, no lights, no flagmen. In fact, the local OSHA office was just down the road a few miles. So there were all kinds of things that happened that went wrong. So I want you to think about this example as we work through coaching safe behaviors. And the reason I bring it up is because this particular company, the gentleman who was sleeping in the chute, that company had some very solid training programs. They were doing training every single morning. Every single morning they talked about some safety topic. They had open communication. They had open dialogue. They weren't coming in at 5 o'clock and taking off at 5:15. They stayed in the yard for a half hour, 45 minutes talking about safety, doing their stretch and flex. They had some issues that we needed to work through. Like, for example, their supervisors became less of an actual supervisor and became more of a working supervisor, but we'll talk through it. Through this safety training that they had, the training became a little bit stale. It became focused more on compliance rather than comprehension. Were our guys understanding the training? Were they putting it into play? And obviously, you can see by the picture, they weren't. So there were a lot of things that failed here. There were a lot of behaviors that failed, and negative attitudes, and actions that were tolerated that ultimately led to a bad safety culture. And in the landscape industry, as a landscape professional, safety culture is extremely important. I can't stress this enough. So when you're coaching your employees to a good positive behavior, you need to know that maintaining a good safety culture is positive, okay? You can build a positive safety culture over time that can be destroyed overnight by one accident, by one bad choice, by one gentleman sleeping in a wood chipper, okay? So I want you to think about that. And ultimately, through coaching activities, we're trying to get buy-in from the employees. We're trying to get the employees and the foremen and the managers and the owners to commit to being safe. We need commitment at every level of the organization to be safe. That's what we're coaching towards. That's our ultimate goal. Okay? So I thought I would give you an example. And don't worry, I won't use any real names. There is no such company as Bob's Green Earth. Well, maybe there is, but I don't have them. But Bob's Green Earth, we're going to use this company, this imaginary company. Bob's Green Earth was a nice mom and pop shop 20 years ago. They started with a pickup truck and a lawnmower. And over time, they grew and grew and grew. They were hardworking, dedicated. Every member of the family eventually started working for the company. And over time, they got so big that they expanded. They went from 1 branch to 2 branches to 5 to 10, with employees spread out from Bakersfield to San Diego. And that's a pretty significant stretch. That's a big company. When we have 10 branches, now we have 10 different account managers running the company. Bob's Green Earth recognized that they needed a safety guy early on. They needed somebody that could focus on safety and ensure that they were compliant and do that safety training that we talked about early. So they started doing their training, but as they grew, they saw that the losses kept creeping up. That's what the graphs are for. You can see that early on they had a couple losses, and then after a while they had a few more. The business was good, so it wasn't that big a deal. They were all relatively minor claims, but okay, business is good. Workers' comp is designed to take care of those types of injuries. So they kept growing and kept growing. And then in early 2017, I got a phone call from the safety manager. It's a gentleman that I've known for quite a long time, almost 20 years. I'm going to call him Dan so that if he's on the phone, he doesn't recognize that I'm talking about his company. But Dan called me and said, "Steve, I've got a problem. I had a significant injury today, and OSHA's coming out, and I don't know what to do. And so we talked about it a little bit. We talked about some of the training that they're doing, and we talked about all of the experience he's had in the industry and the fact that he's been with the company for many, many years. But he was really concerned about this one accident and all of the behaviors that led up to this and what OSHA would think of his programs. And I said, okay, well, what we need to do is we need to figure out, you know, the specifics behind the accident, but we also need to figure out why the accident happened. You know, if we're going to coach these employees back to good, positive behaviors, you know, the negative behavior that created the accident, we need to get rid of that immediately. But now we need to work forward. You know, we need to take those losses from where they were in 2017 down to zero. So we need to take a look at our company, see exactly where the problem is, and then work towards correcting that behavior. So the very first step, what we really did was we looked at every single loss that happened over the last year. We identified the problem, and what we found is that the foremen in the field, the guys that we were charging with enforcing safety rules and getting production done and getting a good quality product at the end of the day, those guys were not effective in what they were doing. They were not effective safety managers. They had some significant problems with the way they presented safety on a daily basis. The problems really stem from these four things. They had a really poor understanding of what motivated an employee. Most of the guys felt that the motivation was, I've given you a job. You should be motivated to be safe because I've given you a job. And that's not adequate. That just doesn't get the safety job done. It may get production done, but it's not necessarily the safest way to do it. They had a really poor ability to train and communicate to their employees. And, you know, without being too offensive, a couple of the foremen out in the field loved the F word. Every other word was something offensive. And in this case, this young man didn't understand that he was offending some of the older guys on the crew. He didn't effectively train. He didn't effectively communicate. He wasn't listening to what they were saying, too. We'll talk about that. There was a really poor understanding at the foreman level of what the owner wanted done. The owner was very clear in his commitment to safety. He told his employees, safety is the most important thing. But they didn't understand that. What they heard is, I want you to be safe, but production is key. So there was some coaching to be done there. We needed to make sure that the foreman understood that. There was also a very poor understanding of safety expectations. Okay? And that's really key. If there is poor communication, and wherever that communication problem may lie, we need to fix that. We need to coach that person back into positive behavior. So what we did is we took some initial steps. Number one, we established a champion. In this case, it was Dan the man. It was Dan the safety guy. I wanted him to be my champion. If he's going to be my coach, he needs to be the one with the enthusiasm for the job. He needs to have the power to stop unsafe behaviors, and he needs to have the authority designated by the owner of the company to make changes on an immediate basis. Now, if you're an owner, if you're a manager listening to the webinar, I want to make sure that you understand that this has nothing to do with ego. In this particular company, this family-run business, they recognized that Dan had the skill set to talk about safety, so they made Dan the man. If you're having issues similar to what I'm describing at your company, you probably need to leave that ego at the door and do an honest, open assessment of your problems and try and work towards coaching positive behaviors. The second step was to make sure that our safety programs were adequate. Your written safety program is your guideline. Whether you're in California, you have to have a written safety program. We call it the IIPP here. Or if you're in a federal state where you're under the general duty clause, you have a responsibility to keep your employees safe. If we don't have a good, solid written program, a roadmap of where we want to be at the end of the year, then it can wander off track. It's hard to coach employees back to a track when there's no track to wander off. Okay? So we need to make sure that we have a good, solid program in place. The other thing we did, a couple of things, we made sure that there was a primary objective, a goal, not a slogan, but an objective. And our objective was very simple. We have too many losses. We're going to get back to 0 losses. That's our goal, because I don't want anybody injured on my job. And that was our objective. It wasn't a slogan. It wasn't like Ford, quality is job one. It wasn't like McDonald's, I'm loving it. This is our objective. This is a smart goal. It's a reasonable goal, something that we can measure, something we can achieve. It's relevant to the employees and to the company. And it's something that we can track. So we established the goals. The next step was to make sure that we communicated to the employees that our goal from now on is 0 losses. No excuses, no exceptions. This is the goal. And from now on, we're going to implement our safety plan. We're going to make sure that we follow these safety rules no matter where we are. We want your commitment to this plan. We want you to buy in because you are the most important asset in our company. And we're going to track it. We're going to make sure that everybody's following the rules. Okay? Next step, we established a structure. We want to make sure, because I can't coach if I don't have a structure. Think about a baseball team. We need somebody, we need a champion guiding the process. And after the head coach, we have other coaches that coach different tasks. And we have a hitting coach that maybe teaches you how to hit. We have a fielding coach. I always think of teaching my daughter how to drive. I have somebody else teaching the basics. I'm out there to coach her on the reality. When she sees somebody act unsafe, I'm there to coach her and show her what the right path would be. So Dan the man, he was my safety manager. I was kind of floating above everybody, guiding the process. The owner was just immediately underneath Dan the man, and we made sure the employees understood that Dan has the support of the owner. We also made sure that the crews understood they were, again, our most important asset. We're doing this because we want you to be safe. You are essentially the most important part of our company, okay? You answer to the foreman on a daily basis, but you are the most important asset. We need you to commit. We need your buy-in. Now we're going to teach the foreman how to make you safer, okay? And we made sure that we that the employees and the foreman all understood that working towards a safety goal, 0 losses, was something we do on a daily basis. We communicated all of this to the employees in a meeting. It was a one-time meeting of about a half hour, and we let them go out on their way. Okay. Next part of the plan, to coach these employees, we had to figure out who needed to be coached. And I started with Dan, my buddy who's been doing safety for 20 years. Dan had lost perspective a little bit. I pulled Dan aside and I said, we want to make sure, if our ultimate goal is to coach the foreman back into positive behaviors, we want to make sure that we establish these things, these goals for them specifically. And we came up with 4 simple ones. Number 1, we want to make sure that we're coaching them on the proper way to correct unsafe, negative behaviors. We want to make sure they understand our code of safe practices and how they can coach them back into positive behaviors. We want to make sure that our foremen demonstrate positive behaviors and know the rules. Think about safety glasses. In this particular company, our foreman would frequently go on site and we would enforce the rules for our employees. They all had to wear safety glasses, but the foreman never wore them. And I just can't have that. So I need to coach the foreman to demonstrate, to model positive behaviors. I need to make sure that they understand this is important. And if we're not modeling positive behaviors, that sends a bad message to the employees. We need to make sure that our foremen understand our corporate goals. What exactly does 0 injuries mean? We needed to explain that. We needed to teach that to them. And we also needed to teach them how to communicate effectively. So we started with monthly safety meetings, informal meetings. Dan the man and I, we would meet with the foreman on a monthly basis, just informally for 10, 15 minutes. We'd give them a chance to, it's actually about bi-weekly, not necessarily monthly, but bi-weekly. We would meet with them informally and get their feedback and say, okay, these are the 4 things that we want you to focus on. How can I make you a better foreman? What do I need to do to teach you how to be a good safety manager? You know, you're my champion out in the field. I'm the champion here working over you guys. You're going to be my champion in the field. Remember, we're working towards commitment and buy-in. Okay. So let's take a step back real quick. Again, Dan needed a little bit of guidance, so I tried to coach Dan a little bit to make sure that his training was effective. He was doing all the trainings. He was doing heat stress. He was talking about safe lifting. He was teaching the power mower operators how to operate them, following all the OSHA guidelines. I watched him do a safety meeting, and I figured out very quickly that Dan was simply reading a safety note. The owner of the company said, "Here, Dan, talk to them about heat stress." And Dan grabbed the sheet, got a little bit lazy, and said, "Okay, we're talking about heat stress today." And he read it. And I said, "Dan, that's good. I appreciate the fact that you're reading them the rules, but they're not going to remember that. They're not going to comprehend. They're not going to take that with them. Let's show them what we mean. Or better yet, let's talk to them. Let's show them what we mean, and let's let them demonstrate that they understand." And he had a little bit of an epiphany. He realized, "Oh, I've gotten a little bit lazy. I didn't realize it. Let's move forward." We needed to talk to him about his communication skills. We needed to make sure that he was credible, that he was concise and specific, that when he talked to the employees, he was giving them information that they just didn't understand. In some cases, he was talking to them about fall protection issues, and they weren't tree climbers. They never went above ground level, so the information wasn't relevant. At that point, they tuned out, and they weren't comprehending. We also discovered that Dan had gotten, again, a little bit lazy, and he wasn't listening. When they said, "Hey, Dan, I'm not a tree climber. I don't need fall protection," he didn't hear that. He was trying to follow his compliance workbook. So once we pointed that stuff out, we explained to him that, we need to make a little bit of a change. We need to refocus and reset. We need to make sure that you understand what motivates these guys out in the field, that they appreciate the fact that you're saying thank you once in a while, that you're recognizing them for positive behavior. Rewards are nice. I don't have any issues with rewards, not incentives, rewards, but recognitions for positive behaviors. And that's a topic for maybe another webinar. We were talking about it earlier, but thank you is a good motivator. Thank you for doing a job well done. And I demonstrated what I meant one day. We went out into the field and I showed him how to say thank you, and he actually kind of forgot that was important. So he became my coach, okay? He became the coach of the foreman. So after that, we went to the foreman. This is our ultimate goal. We needed to teach them. We needed to coach them into positive behaviors. We needed to show them that when they were out in the field, if you saw a negative behavior, you can't jump on the guys. You can't say, "No, I got you." That's not helpful. That's the wrong way to do it, okay? In one particular case, one of the foremen was sitting in his truck in the air conditioning while the guys were working. And he waited for them to do something wrong. And then he ran up to them and said, "You're doing this wrong. Come here, I've got a write-up for you." We coached him a little bit. We said, "This is not helpful. All of the other foremen understand how to correct negative behaviors. This is not helpful. Let's be a little bit more positive. Let's be upbeat. Try telling them they're doing something right for a change. Okay, you're doing this right, but what I'd really like you to do is X, Y, and Z." They're going to respond much better. We need to coach that foreman. Okay, at that point, he was doing something wrong. We needed to coach him back to some positive behaviors. Again, demonstrating positive behaviors. A lot of the foremen didn't know how to model safe, positive behaviors. We had to teach them that when they went out, if you're holding them accountable, your employees accountable for safety behaviors, you need to model it. If you're telling them they have to wear safety glasses, you better be wearing them. The owner of the company actually didn't quite understand that rule. We had to coach the owner of the company. "Look, I don't want you on my job site if you're not going to wear safety glasses." So there was some coaching to be done there too. We needed to coach the foreman on the corporate goals. And in this case, what we did with the foreman is to make sure that they understood, that they comprehended the corporate goals, that our goal was 0 losses. Every single time we went out to a job site, the first thing we did was check to make sure everybody was working safely. They had their PPE, they weren't in travel lanes, they weren't under a tree that was about to fall. The second thing we did was, what's our goal this year? 0 losses. We wanted that response because we want that to be ingrained in the employees. And I taught my foreman to do that. You need to ask your employees, what is our goal today? To be safe, to go home safe every night with all our fingers and our toes intact, and to come back to work the next day. We needed to coach those foremen because they were so focused on production, they didn't realize that safety was important too. The last thing that we coached the foreman on was effective communication. We needed to make sure that they understood how to talk to their employees. And I'll go back to my foreman who loved the F word. There's a time and a place for communication. And believe me, I am not telling you how to run your businesses. Okay? I can tell you what I have seen and what I've experienced. Early on in my career, I was given some authority at a particular place where I worked. They said, here, Steve, here's 10 people. I want you to manage these employees. And the first thing I did was, I'm in charge. You're going to follow my rules. Okay? And that didn't work. And I can tell you from experience, my employees coached me. They told me that if you're going to come with a heavy hand, not going to work. You need to come back and talk to us when you're ready to communicate effectively, when you're there to collaborate. I had another opportunity to run a crew. And in this particular crew, the guys like to tell jokes back and forth. And the jokes were always those, without offending anybody, again, your mama jokes. Your mama is this, your mama is that. And I tolerated it. I allowed it. But what that created was a very negative atmosphere. After a few months, I realized the guys didn't like each other anymore because they were telling jokes. That's poor communication. I needed some coaching. I needed to make sure that we shut that behavior down. Please understand that your atmosphere is very different than others. When we're out in the field, it's a family. Your guys work together all day, every day, 5, 6 days a week. That little crew is a family. We don't want to change the dynamic of that, but we also want to make sure that we're communicating effectively, that we're telling them this is acceptable and this is not. We need to coach those foremen, okay? Make sure they understand what you consider effective. All right. Okay. Next step. After 3 or 4 months, we felt that our foremen were behaving adequately, that they were starting to come back around to positive behaviors, encouraging positive behaviors, that they were enforcing the safety rules, that they all understood our corporate goal of 0 losses. Dan and I decided that it was now time to audit the process and make sure that we were holding our crews accountable in a consistent way, that we had communicated our goals, we had communicated our expectations, and now we're holding everybody accountable for their specific ways. So we created a checklist, and you can kind of ignore the checklist on the bottom there. That's not exactly the way it looked, but we created a checklist of behaviors that we wanted to make sure that every crew, every foreman could follow, that we could audit them to make sure that we measured the fact that they were communicating their employees, that their crews understood the corporate safety goals, that they understood what the safety expectations were, that they were following good safety rules, that they weren't sleeping in the back of a wood chipper, in the loading zone of a wood chipper, okay? So we went out on job sites and we started following the checklist. We would check the crews and say, Foreman XYZ, Foreman Bob was doing a good job. However, there were a couple things that were missing. The next natural step of coaching really is evaluations. You need to make sure that you're giving feedback to your crews. The folks that need the feedback the most, the ones that are enforcing your safety rules, whoever you designate, in this case it was the foreman, we needed to have some evaluations where we took these checklists from the field, we gave them the feedback and said, this is what we're working towards. Okay? We want it to be positive. We want you to keep being a good, positive member of our crew, because in this environment, I need the guys that I have. I've spent a lot of time and money training them. I want to keep them on my crews. Okay? I don't want to have to go hire a new guy. I want to keep the ones that I have. We have to give them that feedback. It takes 5 minutes. Okay? It doesn't need to be complicated. 5 minutes is good, positive feedback. But we need to keep that feedback flowing. In this case, we established monthly meetings to give that feedback. We felt that after a year, we could probably scale that back to quarterly feedback, because I do want my guys out in the field, but at the same time, I still need to keep that coaching atmosphere in place. I want to make sure that I'm guiding them towards positive behavior. Okay? After a few months of coaching Dan the man, my safety guy, and coaching the foreman on positive behaviors, we focused heavily on the employees, okay? So that little picture in the bottom right corner there didn't happen again. Okay? I want to be able to trust my employees. I want to make sure that they understand my expectations. They're modeling good behavior on a regular basis, and they're following the rules, whether I'm watching them or not. Now, if you're an owner listening to this webinar, the challenge really is to make sure that your safety champion and your foreman have time dedicated to coaching their employees, both giving and receiving coaching. You need to make sure that they have this time, because without proper coaching, behaviors that are negative will continue, and we'll still have guys sleeping in wood chippers. We'll still have guys riding in the front end of a skip loader. We'll still have guys climbing trees without proper tie-ins, without proper safety lines. So we need to make sure that we give them time to be good safety champions. We need to teach them. Teaching them about heat stress is good. We also need to teach them how to be good safety managers. Teaching them about safe lifting and the proper use of a mule or a gator out on the job site. That's important, but we also need to make sure that we're guiding the employees back to good positive behaviors when they're having some issues. In my particular case, with my employer, we had success. Within a year, our losses had fallen 50%. 50%. And we talked about it after a year, and we felt that there were several things that contributed to that success. Number one, we were out in the field guiding our employees on a more regular basis. Our visibility was at its highest level. Safety efforts were first and foremost in their mind. The employees were buying in. They were giving us feedback saying, I need this, I need that. There are problems that we have, okay? We need help, and they were giving us the feedback. Every time we went out to a job site, those guys knew exactly what the safety goal was. They understood that our goal was 0 losses. We wanted everybody to go home the same way that they came to work. Okay? They understood all of that. And ultimately, we ended up with fewer losses. That's what we're working towards. Okay? Now, I would encourage you to use this same process whether you have any losses or not. Okay? One of my clients down near San Diego is a pretty large drywaller. He's had 0 losses for 3 years. 3 years. And he came to me one day and said, Steve, now what? I said, what do you mean? Aren't you happy with no losses? He said, absolutely, I'm ecstatic. I haven't had a loss in 3 years, but now what? I'm worried about the things that I'm missing. I'm worried that I'm being effective out in the field, that my training is effective, that my employees are effective, that my managers are effective. I don't want this to be luck. Safety is not luck. Safety is a process. It's building that culture. It's getting the buy-in. It's coaching positive methods. It's important that we consider that, okay? So I would challenge you, if you're an owner, I would challenge you to go back and look at your company and say, you know what, am I allowing these behaviors to happen? Something that may lead to a guy sleeping in a wood chipper. At that point, we have some discussions that need to be made. We have to have a conversation and try and figure out where we're maybe missing an opportunity, and then coach back towards a positive behavior. Okay. Couple things. I want to make sure that you have some other methods of coaching, because not everybody coaches in the same way. You can do a lot of positive, proactive tasks to coach employees or foremen that have bad behaviors. This is a little difficult. The first one, have an employee lead a safety meeting. At times, they're not comfortable speaking. You may have to have your safety champion there to guide them. Mentorship programs. Have a good employee work with a bad employee and guide them back towards positive behaviors. That's a method of coaching. It's important to change up the crews once in a while. Designate an employee, especially one who is maybe giving you some negative feedback. I don't like this safety activity. I don't like that safety activity. Make them a safety auditor for the day. Have them write all of that information down and work towards a mutual goal. Collaborate. That's one way of coaching. I can tell you, and Drew is listening on the line here, early on when I played baseball when I was a young man, I couldn't hit the ball for nothing. It didn't matter how much coaching I had, I could not hit the ball. And then one day a coach of mine said, Steve, maybe we should make you catcher because then you'll watch the ball. you'll learn to watch the ball. Otherwise, it's going to hit you in the head. That was one way he guided me towards being, or guiding me towards a positive behavior. You can have employees sit in on management meetings. You need to be a little careful, but you can have them sit in on management meetings where we talk about goals, especially safety goals. Have them provide feedback. Ultimately, though, we're trying to address behaviors. And I really want you to understand that. This is the guts of the information. By coaching, we're trying to coach behaviors, not conditions. Conditions are easy to fix. If you have a mower that's not guarded properly, we can fix that. It's easy. You should be fixing that every single day. Behaviors are a little difficult. If we don't coach behaviors, we end up with negative cultures, and a negative safety culture leads to bad accidents and poor safety profiles, okay? So ultimately, you need to focus on negative behaviors and try and fix that. It is an absolute truism. We need to focus on behaviors. Safety is all about behaviors, okay? So to work towards a summary real quick, because I know I'm running a little short on time, I want everybody who's listening to this to challenge yourself a little bit, as a homework assignment, set your ego aside, set your preconceived notions to the side. Don't simply assume that everything you're doing towards safety is positive, okay? Look at your organization and see where you might have an opportunity. Like my drywall contractor. Okay, I'm safe. I haven't had a loss in 3 years. Where am I missing the boat? Where can I fix something? Where can I make it even better? Where can I lead by example? Where is my safety culture maybe not as positive as it should be? Okay, so write down some of the items that we've talked about here, some ways to coach employees back to good positive safety behaviors, and focus on that moving forward. Things like identifying the problem. Look at your company and see where the problem is. Don't blame, but find that root cause. Don't blame. Establish a clear path. Create expectations and goals, especially goals that are reasonable, smart, relevant, and trackable. We want goals that they can achieve, because if they achieve something, you're gonna achieve that commitment. You're gonna get that buy-in that you need, because everybody likes to succeed. Okay. Make sure that you're communicating your goals effectively. We can't coach employees who are demonstrating negative behaviors if we don't have clearly communicated goals. At the end of the process, make sure you're auditing it. Measure your success. Determine where we can provide an evaluation and correct things moving forward. Guide that person toward positive behaviors. Do a one-on-one coaching session. Coaching often works best when you're one-on-one. Group coaching is good if we have a large group that has similar behaviors, similar negative behaviors. One-on-one coaching is almost always better. And finally, make sure that you are a good coach. Be a good coach. Be that person that actively listens. Actively listens. You can't listen with your ears if you're talking with your mouth. It just doesn't work. And my wife tells me that every single day. And I appreciate that, because I have some issues where I tend to talk at times when I should be listening. So you need to practice that. You need to care. You need to understand. This is a family. We can't create a positive behavior, positive culture if we don't care. Make sure that you're objective. Be consistent and true to your attitudes. Make sure you're demonstrating positive attitudes. You're striving towards two-way communication, not one. Look for things like nonverbal cues, negative body mechanics, negative body behavior can often lead to some poor communication. Practice solid nonverbal negative cues, neutral cues. Be consistent, be articulate, and try and be very, very clear in your message. Keep it simple. Keep it very, very simple, but communicate it often, okay? And I think if you do that, you'll be a good, solid safety coach. I want to make sure that you follow these procedures as often as possible, and keep a focus on safety. Be proactive, and you can make a difference. This last slide has my information. Again, it's shamilton@bhhc.com. If you have feedback for the presentation, please email me directly. I have no problem getting feedback. I want to make this better for everybody. That's my cell phone number. You can call me anytime. It's on 24/7. But remember, I'm in California. So if you're in New York, there's a little bit of a time difference. So I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But I appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate you listening to the webinar today. Hopefully it was helpful, and if it is, I'm glad it was. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I don't have any questions that have come in. If anybody does have any questions that are on this call, please go ahead and send them in to me. I don't see anything at this time, so if so, you can send them to me or to Steve afterwards, and we're happy to make sure your questions are answered. So I just want to thank Steve for this great webinar. And in order to improve our future webinars, if you could, please take a few minutes to fill out the evaluation, which will appear on your screen at the end of this call. We appreciate your feedback, and we'd like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all.